My name is Ben Turney and I'm the CEO of Kavango Resources. We are a metals exploration company with projects in Zimbabwe and Botswana. In Zimbabwe, we're looking for gold exploration projects with a view to developing these into mines. And in Botswana, we're hunting for large-scale copper deposits in the Kalahari Copper Belt.
Good to see you, Ben. I haven't seen you since October. A lot of things have changed, including your dress sense. What's going on?
I've moved out to Zimbabwe, so I'm adapting to my new surroundings. Thanks for that.
Very good, Bushranger Ben. I'm the only one laughing at that joke, by the way. Let's talk about what you've been up to. Okay, so you've moved over there. Let's start with that. Why? Why did you feel it necessary to move over?
We raised a lot of money last year through the Kansagra family, and as part of our brief with the new investors coming in, we took the company into Zim, as you know, last year, Matt. Taking on 3 gold exploration projects. We spent a lot of time doing due diligence on Zimbabwe, and we're very, very enthusiastic about the opportunity that we see here. We believe it is significant, and we are one of the only companies that's actually active in this part of the world with enormous geological potential. One of the things, however, that we recognised very early about Zimbabwe, just being completely honest about it, is it's not a jurisdiction to move into lightly. Really, to be effective here, you have to be strong on the ground. To try and run a business like ours remotely, we recognised very early on we'd be on a hiding to nothing. So in keeping with the faith that the Kansagra family has put into our company, I really felt it was necessary and appropriate for me to step up to the challenge, step up to the plate and come and lead the business from the ground.
Okay, and I wish more people would do it, quite frankly. They seem to like to manage it from the offices of Toronto, London and wherever else they are. Tell us more about the shareholder, the family, or Pure Bond is I think the name of the company. Who are they? You know, I know they put £6 million pounds in, but is there more? Have they got more to them than this?
They have a lot more to them than this. So Ramesh and Bulo Kansagra have been running their family business for about the last 50 years. They built up a Pan-African conglomerate with interests in mining, oil and gas, industrial, leisure. They built it in commodities. They built a very, very successful family-owned company. They run their business with a great sort of family ethic behind it, and they built an enormous amount of wealth. They've been hugely successful throughout the continent. Now, the Kansagras were introduced to Kavango by our director, Peter Winterby. Peter is one of the co-founders of Moxico Resources. Peter invested $100,000 into Moxico back in 2015 into the Mimbula copper asset in Zambia. This was at a time when obviously copper was struggling and no one wanted to invest in Zambia following the nationalisation that had happened in that country. But Peter is very much a contrarian and he's had phenomenal success at Moxico. He's taken that company, I believe it's up to now about £1 billion valuation, and it's privately held. They bought the Mimbula asset into production. Now, the Kansagras joined Moxico as investors in that company, but a bit late in the day, and they've done very well out of it. I think they own about 5 or 6% of the company, so it's been a very profitable investment for them. But they were very keen to get in at the very beginning. So these are entrepreneurs at heart. And once Peter had learned about Kavango, Peter introduced the Kansagras to us in November or October 2022 when they first participated in the placing, and that was the beginning of the relationship. I first met them in December 2022, and we then started to have much more advanced discussions with them in the first half of last year, which then culminated in their investment in the company. They've been hugely supportive of us and our team. They've really thrown their weight behind us. And yes, I do believe that there is a lot more in the pipeline ready to invest into us once we've demonstrated success.
Okay, brilliant. And I think it's important for people to understand who's standing behind you. You're a small company, right? We're talking £10 million sterling market cap. Thereabouts, right? And it's been a tough year for everyone in the equities. It's not a gold thing. It's not a copper thing. It's an equities thing at the moment. And I think a lot of companies are happy just to survive, right? You've actually done a deal. You've got £6 million into the company, but you've also announced that you're going to be a revenue producer. Tell me more.
So I think one of the things that's really set Kavango apart over the last few years is that while we haven't yet had the success in the field that I believe our team deserves for all the effort that they've put in, What we have done is we've really put all of our energy and our funds into the ground. We haven't paid ourselves absurd salaries. We've kept very tight control over our costs, and we've really hit our projects hard, particularly when it comes to drilling. And I think the pace that we've set over the last few years, that was one of the things that attracted the Kansagras into investing into us. Now, with the move into Zimbabwe, another aspect of the opportunity here that we recognised was the potential for near-term revenue generation. We didn't want to talk too much about that as we were coming into the country because we could see the opportunity that was there. And I'll be frank, we didn't want to give that away to the market. We've identified what we believe is a first mover advantage, and we wanted to be the ones who really were well placed to benefit from that. So a big part of our focus over the last 6 months while preparing for me to move down here and alongside our larger scale exploration. So we're looking for primarily larger, bulk minable, open pit gold deposits. That's our main objective. But in parallel to that, we also wanted to look at opportunities for bringing revenue into the company and increasing that revenue in the short term. Last week, we announced our maiden resource on the dump at our Nara project. We've announced just under 6,000 ounce resource, which is in the indicated category. So that obviously quite a high degree of confidence that gold is there. We used a bottle roll technique to analyze the auger samples that we drilled. So the 0.62 grams per ton that we've identified, we're confident that that's going to be hopefully near as damn it the recovery rate as well. So that's a fantastic opportunity for the company that could bring in quite serious revenue over the next couple of years once we've exercised the option and built the plant. But what we've also done, Matt, is we've taken on our first mining contracts as well. Zimbabwe has a long pedigree of small-scale mining. The system of claims here, these 10-hectare blocks that individuals or smaller operators can mine on, present an opportunity in Zim with the amount of near-surface free gold that there is here for quite significant revenue. So what we've announced at the end of last week is the first of our mining contracts, which is independent from our option at our Hillside project. And we have a plan there to bring that project to double production up to 1 kilo a month. That's what we've put into the market. My feeling and my sense on the ground, however, is that we can do much better. And once we've actually got our team established, we've made the transition from being just an exploration company through to a company that is actually generating revenue and processing the sands and also mining. We'll then look to expand on that and take on other small scale contracts as well.
Okay, I always get. I'm trying to work out whether you're being agile and nimble and reactive to the opportunity in front of you, or you're changing strategy, or you're covering up the fact that you were a long way from making a discovery. It's really hard to make a call on small companies when they do things like this. Talk to me about the economics of this. You've told me how many ounces you think you've got there, and hopefully, because it's indicated, you'll be able to recover near as damn it that amount of ounces out of the ground. How do you finance that? What does that kind of CapEx and OpEx structure look like, and why is that sort of net profitable to you?
Yeah, so it's definitely a fair comment to make about the sector in general, and whether something like this, is this just PR spin, or are there genuine fundamentals at play here? Obviously, time will tell. We have to prove with the results that we deliver. What I would say is with the backing of the Kansagras, now that they have 52% shareholders, so we know who we are accountable to. So for the economics themselves, one of the things I think that didn't really come across to our shareholders last week is that we announced that the current production at the Hillside project is about 0.5 kilo a month, which give or take is around about $30,000 revenue a month. What that covers is pretty much it's a small profitable mining operation that covers its costs at this stage. It basically washes its face. The purpose of the contract mine for the claim owners is it enables them to hold the ground, because so long as the claims have gold being produced on them, then that enables them to hold the claims in perpetuity. For a company like ours, however, that obviously isn't so interesting. We obviously need to be able to hold our ground, but we also need to be able to make money. Good money as well, particularly with the PLC overhead that we have. So in doubling production up to 1 kilo, we won't actually be taking on much in terms of additional cost. That extra 0.5 kilo of production, the margin on that will be extremely high. Now, it's too early for us to start talking about projections and numbers. We need to actually put this into practice on the ground. But from what we've seen of other operations locally, what we've learned from miners down here, we know what is possible here. here. And I think in about 3 or so months' time, when we are actually able to start reporting these results, it will all become clear to everybody at that point.
So, yeah, the name of the game is to make money, right? So this is neither here nor there. And, some people will view it as a distraction, but you're saying, actually, if we're able to hold the claims, if we're actually operating some degree in country, and you're physically there, are you trying to say, look, we're here for the long haul. We are trying to show you that we are, part of the community. I mean, what are the other kind of soft factors that you're trying to answer? That sort of always intrigues me.
Well, that's exactly the point. We do want to send out the message that we are here and we are here to stay. I didn't really answer your question earlier about sort of how we are going to pay for this, and I think maybe this will help us to answer this question as well. We have obviously the backing of the Kansagras behind us. I think one thing to remember about this business, Matt, is that mining is very different from exploration. A lot of people can put mining and exploration together as one business. They're actually not. They're two very, very different business models, completely different skill sets, completely different sets of employees that are required for the two different types of business. We're very confident in the exploration arm that we've set up in Zimbabwe. We learned a lot from Botswana. We took a lot of that Botswana experience and brought that over to Zimbabwe. We've already recruited a really excellent team here on the ground. So the exploration programs, those are running ahead on their own, full steam ahead. We've already drilled 1,400 meters at Hillside, and we're about to start drilling at Nara very soon. With me being here on the ground, what that then gives us the opportunity to do is to start to build up our mining arm as well. So we've set up a completely separate subsidiary called Kavango Mining, and it's through Kavango Mining that we will build up the mining side of the business. So we'll be able to leverage the operational, logistical, administrative, financial support of Kavango Zimbabwe, which is currently supporting the exploration programs. That is all transferable over to Kavango Mining as well. So that will obviously help a great deal. But in terms of the actual operational management, the people on the ground who will actually be running the mining operation, it's a completely different team that we need to build up for this side of the business. So I wouldn't say that it's a distraction. It's certainly a lot of work. I haven't had that much sleep since I've been down here in Zimbabwe. We really have had a huge amount on our plates while we've been getting this all up and running. But we are also starting from a relatively modest scale. So I don't believe that we're taking off more than we can chew. This first contract is quite small at this stage, but it's a stepping stone. As I said in my quote in the announcement, this is a first step towards what we hope will become a much, much bigger and much more important part of our business over the coming few years.
Yeah, because I think you're right. I think people are going to look at this and go, look, if it wipes its face, then maybe that's fine. If it's not a distraction, which is a distraction from the exploration, then it's kind of fine. If it allows you to have conversations in country with decision makers, then it's fine. But the real, and it's kind of fairly at this sort of level, fairly mom and pop, right? The real value is going to be attributed to you making discoveries. Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zimbabwe is obviously, I guess, kind of key for you. Can we just sort of start off there? What is the exploration plan? What is the budget? And so where are you in the process?
You're absolutely right. The key upside for us and our shareholders will be in making discoveries that we can bring through to mining. That's the blue sky in the business. But at the same time, I wouldn't discount what we're going to do with Kavango Mining. I certainly see a lot of other operations out there that try to go down this route, and these things barely wash their face. There really is a lot of opportunity down here to deploy modest amounts of capital, and I believe generate very, very profitable businesses. A lot of gold production, Matt, at the moment within the region is reliant on 19th century technology. I'm really not exaggerating there. They're using what are called stamp mills. So these old piston-driven crushing units that crush the ore for processing. To modernize those and bring those up to the 1980s even, we're still talking technology that in mining terms is very, very old. So there's a lot of efficiency and a lot of additional upside that can be generated through the mining business. But on the discovery side, this is really why we're most excited, and this is why we're here. One of the great things about Zimbabwe is that over the last 20 years, the small-scale mining that I was describing has been extremely fundamental in driving this country's economy forward. Now, there's a lot of what you may read in the press or in the statistics and the tables about sort of how poor Zimbabwe is, how it's at the bottom of the league table pretty much for everything. But what most people miss, and the map behind me illustrates this perfectly, is the geology in Zimbabwe is actually very, very similar to that of Western Australia. So through the country, you have, just as you can see, these greenstone belts marked in yellow. There are 22 of them that are almost identical to what the Australians have. And of course, in the mid-1980s, it was those greenstone belts in Australia that led to the gold mining boom, the open pit mining boom. Now, the interesting thing about Zimbabwe and Australia's gold production is that they followed pretty much the same trajectory for about 100 years, from the late 1900s through to the 1980s. And this obviously reflects the fact that the geology was largely the same, and they were both part of the British Empire for a large period of that time. Now, in the 1980s, in the mid-1980s, Zimbabwe started to go through some of its internal troubles, but Australia went through the bulk mining boom, which meant that that country hasn't had a recession, I think, now in 38 years. Zimbabwe's geology and Zimbabwe's terrain hasn't changed in that period, but it hasn't yet experienced that boom. So what we are now looking for are exactly those types of deposits that the Australians found and started to monetize heavily. Australia went from being sort of outside of the top 10 gold producers in 1982 to consistently being in the top 3 over the last 25 years. So Zimbabwe, the potential that we see here is enormous, and it is largely untested. So for a company like ours to be on the ground, to be well funded, to be in a position where we can generate revenue, and with the team that we've built, it's a very, very exciting opportunity for us.
It is. No, I get the opportunity. It is set out in front of you, but what I want to hear about is a plan. Have you got one? How are you funding it? Well, we know you've got money, but how are you allocating that capital to it? Because again, you've got to be quite judicious with where you put your money and how quickly you rip through that. Because what you've got in front of you is a massive opportunity, but also not a lot of data, right? So how are you going to tackle it?
Well, first of all, we do have a lot of data here. So we're working with a guy called Steve Smith, who used to be the business development manager for Anglo American in Tanzania for 8 years. Steve's got over 6 million ounces of discovery under his belt, and he spent the last 15 years working in the Matabeleland goldfields in southern Zimbabwe. You can see on the map behind me. During that time, Steve has picked up an enormous amount of data. I mean, if I turn
which you now own,
which we now have direct access to. It's Steve's. In fact, it's all piled up in the room just over here. At some point, we'll do a video presentation on it. We've bought a high-tech scanner, and we're in the process of digitizing that data, putting it into formats that we can actually use and our technical guys can actually use. Now, that data is brilliant because what that's helped us do is to narrow down on the target areas. So when we started doing our due diligence, we lent on Steve's experience and the data that Steve has to look at the areas to focus it on. We then identified the projects, and I think you've just hit the nail on the head. We have to be judicious. I think that's a great word to describe our business model. Someone once said to me, a problem about Zimbabwe for new entrants, new companies coming in, is they're far more likely to die of indigestion than they are starvation. There is so much opportunity on the ground here. The risk of taking on too much is actually a very real risk. So we came in here, I think, with the right mindset. And we applied that then, having identified the target areas that we wanted to focus on regionally, we started to look at the projects. We then identified the projects that we felt were of the right size, that wouldn't be taking on more than we could chew, but were sufficiently large that offered a lot of upside. So with Nara and with Hillside in particular, we're going to be putting some more news out on those in the near future. What we've said to the market so far is that we're targeting 1 million ounces at each of those, so relatively modest size in global terms, but with the exploration data that we have coming through, we're very encouraged. What we're targeting then within the projects, we're looking for bulk mineable, open pittable mines. As you know, these are the types of mines that cost less to bring into production. So the technology that's required, it's still quite expensive. So we could be looking at anywhere from $20 to $25 million for plants, for creating a plant if we find the right style of deposit. So it's still a lot of money. However, if we do find the right style of deposit with the potential returns that could be on offer, we think we would have a very, very attractive offering to put out to investors, not least because of the business that we're growing on the ground. And if that business is also sustaining itself and is profitable because we are already in mining, I think that will help our value proposition a great deal. And of course, then on top of all of that, we have the Kansagras acting as our cornerstone. When the Kansagras took on their 52% holding in Kavango, they had to go through a Rule 9 whitewash. As I'm sure you're aware, that's a torturous process to have to go to, especially for high net worth or ultra high net worth guys like these. They went through that process without complaints, and I think that underlines their commitment to Kavango moving forward. So as we do start to need to raise more money for the business, having that 52% behind us, which has also indicated a keenness to take more within the company as well, should we not be able to raise funds from elsewhere. So overall, I think we're in a very, very strong position for a company of our size.
Okay, so just tell me, so let's get into the weeds a little bit with regards to Nara and Hillside, okay? Steve's gone on board. He's got some data. I mean, what type of data? Is it drill data or is it mostly surface stuff?
There's an enormous amount of, this is pre-BRIEX. This is data going back, in some cases, to the 1920s and 1930s. We have production reports. We have exploration drill data. We have geochemistry. We've even got some historic geophysics. There are deposits we know that have been drilled where resources were defined. They're non-code compliant resources. They sit on some of these projects. We have all the underground production reports. We've been modelling at both Hillside and Nara the high grade underground mines that are at both of those. Those have given us a lot of very interesting data to work with because it shows us the footprint of the ore body itself. And when you consider the envelope of mineralization that we're targeting, that we expect would be around the original high-grade mine, that gives us an idea of the potential size and scale of the deposits we might be looking for. So, yeah, an enormous amount for us to work with, and it's really given us a running start as we've come into this country.
Can you tell us more? Because looking at mapping and surface surveys and etc. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you go about targeting where you put the drills? Because appreciate it's relatively inexpensive to operate in country, but you still be smashing through a lot of dollars or pounds, whatever it's denominated in country. How do you give comfort of the kind of level of certainty that you have about where you go and where you drill?
One of the biggest challenges in exploration is knowing where to start. In Botswana, where we've got 14,000 square kilometres, it's an enormous amount of ground, and it really is like finding a needle in a haystack. In Zimbabwe, however, most of the prospecting, most of the scouting has already been done because the locals, the small-scale miners, they have been mining from surface the high-grade gold and the free gold. Now, that's wonderful for a company like ours because what they've done is they've effectively mapped out where these larger-scale ore bodies could be. When a lot of the gold deposits formed, they formed billions of years ago in these what are called reefs, these parallel reefs. And it's the parallel reefs that the smaller scale guys tend to be mining because it's those reefs that carry the high grade. So a reef might be, let's say, 1.5 meters thick, and there might be 6, 7, 8 of these reefs running parallel to one another. The secret of the gold mining boom and the open pit boom, what the Australians started to do when their high grade production was starting to decline much more significantly, they started to look at the reefs more like this, and they would come and hit them on a parallel and look to test all of the material that's in between. That's exactly what we're doing at our project. We actually have a video on our Twitter feed, which I'll repost after this interview goes out, where we show at the Nara project 8 reefs that run in parallel to one another, and it's these reefs that we'll be looking to test by hitting them at perpendicular to see what the material in between, the mineralization envelope might contain. The guys in the field are laughing at us at the moment. When they see us coming and testing this rock, they're saying, yeah, but this is our waste rock. They're looking to mine 5 grams plus, up to 10 grams, maybe more. We're obviously looking for material that's running at 1 gram plus a ton, because what you sacrifice in grade, you can make up many, many times over in overall tonnage. That's the point of the open pit boom. So for us to have the degree of confidence where to start looking, well, that work's already been done for us because these reefs have been mined. And honestly, Matt, you see them everywhere you go, where you see the mining activity that's happening and has been happening over the last 20 years, all of these pits that are running in parallel together on project after project in this part of the world. And it just hasn't been tested. It really is quite an incredible opportunity down there.
Yeah, I think obviously artisanal workings are, you said, very good indicator there's something there for sure. And just again, give me comfort over like money and how you're allocating it in terms of like your Maiden drill program. When does that start? How many meters? How many dollars, pounds? How are you spending it? Just give me a sort of sense of the level of confidence level of regression that you have with regards to the drilling.
So we've already completed our maiden drill campaign. So even though we've only been in country for 9 months, we managed to get the rig up from South Africa within 3 months, and we completed.
Oh, okay.
And we completed the first.
This was the November, December stuff that you did.
November, December into January. Yeah. So we completed.
Right. Okay.
So we have already drilled 1,400 meters. We're trying to get those core samples tested at the moment. We've seen some really, really interesting looking rocks at this stage. Nothing that we can really sort of talk too much about at this stage, because as Steve constantly likes to tell us, you can in gold exploration have the best looking rocks packed full of sulfides that you're certain you've hit the mother lode, and then you find out the gold values in there are negligible. So we must do the assay test before we start talking about this. In terms of the next phase of drilling with the money that...
When's that due? Before we get onto that, when are the assays due?
That's the $64,000 question. We've run into a few issues locally in terms of getting our samples exported. We haven't actually managed to do that yet. We have sent some samples off to a local laboratory that won't be internationally accredited to the level that we need, but we do need to start getting results in so it doesn't delay our programs. We will put those results out into public domain once we have them. I'm hoping that by the end of April we should have resolved all of this and have the first results through.
Is this a Ministry of Mining issue, export issue? I mean, there are other miners in country, aren't there?
Well, there are other miners, but there aren't many explorers. Goes back to what I was saying earlier, 2 very different business models. Where on the one hand you have a wonderful pedigree of mining in Zimbabwe, and I think in many ways this is probably one of the most mining-friendly jurisdictions in the world because so many people are involved in mining. They understand it. It's in their blood. Exploration, on the other hand, is a completely different culture. And there isn't much understanding about exploration here. So I think part of the...
But miners and producers must have explored once. Was it a while ago? Is that what you're saying?
I think in most cases a long time ago. The kind of modern exploration Kavango is pursuing hasn't really been done on a large scale in Zimbabwe ever. I mean, the last time that there was a lot of exploration activity was in the mid to late 1990s, believe it or not. Obviously, from the early 2000s, Zimbabwe had another bout of internal issues with the farm invasions and what have you, and that meant that a lot of the foreign companies just simply pulled out. So in modern exploration, there really has been hardly any. And I pointed to these 22 Archean greenstone belts that have been heavily mined for over 100 years. They still present what amounts to virgin exploration ground for companies like ours because people just haven't done this work yet. The opportunity is enormous.
How do you employ skilled people? Where do they come from?
This is one of the things I love about Zimbabweans. They have a saying down here, let's make a plan. This is a nation of people who make a plan. Whatever is thrown at them, they find a way of getting through. And the Zimbabwean diaspora is enormous. So you have this rich pedigree of mining in the country with this wonderful geology. There are a lot of Zimbabwean geologists around the world working on exploration programs. Hilary Gumbo is a perfect example of this. He's our co-founder. He's from Harare, but he set his business up in Botswana in 2012. So Hilary really is very representative of the Zimbabwean diaspora that works in the exploration and mining sectors. So there are a lot of very well-trained Zimbabweans. So we've been able to recruit locally. The vast majority of our team we have recruited from Zimbabwe. We are bringing new skills and new technologies in. So one of our key commitments to our employees here is we are looking to train them in modern methods, use of modern technology. But the labour force is actually already here, or it's in other parts of the world. We have a geologist that we've taken on who's from Zimbabwe. He's actually from Bulawayo. He'd been working out in Saudi Arabia. So we brought him back from Saudi Arabia. He was delighted to have an employment opportunity nearer to home, which means he could be with his family, having worked for so long abroad. And he's a perfect example of what a company like ours can do, attracting talent from abroad home again.
What's the kind of cost per meter out there in terms of running? What are you running? Are you auger? Are you diamond? Or what are you using?
So for exploration, we're diamond. For testing the dumps, it was auger. Auger was much cheaper. I think the drilling at the Nara pump cost us about $14,000. In Botswana, we are budgeting a figure of around about $300 a metre. That is all in, so that's not just the drill rate, that's all of the testing and support, everything that goes into it. In Zimbabwe, it's around about 2/3 of that, so it's around about just under $200 a metre. So that's roughly what we're budgeting for the holes that we drill. Our drilling tends to be a bit more expensive because we run oriented core. We need to understand about the structure, certainly in the first instance, to get a feel for what the ore bodies might look like. And we also perform surveys as well, downhole surveys. We look to extract maximum data from the holes that we drill. So it's certainly not the cheapest drilling, but it is the most effective.
Right. Okay. And what's the sort of balance in terms of allocation of capital between the two countries?
At the moment, it's probably about 35-65. So 35 in Botswana, 65 in Zimbabwe. That's going to change. We've just flown some airborne surveys on the Kalahari Copper Belt in Botswana. We're planning to start drilling there soon. So our operational focus is going to switch back more to Botswana as we run that campaign. There's an enormous amount of upside, and working with Dave Catterall, the man who's behind the discovery of Zone 5 that recently was sold for $1.8 billion. We took on additional ground in Botswana where we tied our two land blocks together by acquiring a block of land from an Australian company called ENRG Elements, and we now have what we hope are two copper mineralizing systems that we're looking to test. So we will start to invest more back in Botswana once we have the drill targets. In the meantime, in Zimbabwe, we'll just continue to push ahead as we are with the team on the ground.
Okay, and so what do you think? We could kind of dive into a few of the other projects, etc., but I think I'd be a little bit too much detail if it's overwhelming for people right now. Is you waiting for some assays to be allowed to be sent away for assay testing? When they come back, that's going to, I guess, be a moment proof point for you should you hit what you want, which is bulk, low grade bulk, open pitable type ore, right? So presumably in the oxides. What do you think people are going to give you credit for? Because I think you're going to get some credit, some kudos, everything but value for doing what you're doing with the tailings, right? Because I think it's useful to you, and it's useful for people to know that you've thought about, things like that as optionality, but it's not a business per se, I think, looking at from outside. What do you think people should be looking at and should be valuing if you can get it right?
So in Botswana, it will be, if we need to hit sufficient copper mineralization, an intersection of sufficient copper mineralization to have made what looks like a commercial discovery. That will be a key inflection point for us in Botswana. If you look at the Kalahari Copper Belt and what's already been achieved there in Botswana in particular, I think that could be a seminal moment for the company. In Zimbabwe, we obviously are expecting that there will be a discount applied by the market to whatever we discover in Zimbabwe. Again, this comes back to what we were talking about earlier about having found the right type of project. I think in Zim, an initial discovery on its own might not provide us with that inflection point, but once we can actually start to drill out a resource and start to show the constituency of a possible ore body we've discovered, I think at that point the penny might start to drop as to what our business has discovered and how we're then going to be moving towards mining that deposit. Okay. Well,
let's see what happens over the next coming weeks and months. Congrats on getting the money in.
Thank you.
And congrats on actually starting a process of actually operating in country. And I think definitely congrats to you for moving into country and dealing with this head on. So appreciate your time today, Ben. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.